Hello, I'm Ryan9 and I'm making a video game. This is Pico Pals, and it's a creature collecting game and a battling game. And I have finished the music, and today I would like to share with you how I made the music. So as you see here from the overworld, it's supposed to be a retro style game, but it's also not pixelated. I didn't want to go for the pixelated style because I think it's kind of overused, even though I like pixel art, but it is very common, so I wanted to do something unique. So instead, I'm using Adobe Illustrator to make clean vector graphics that still look like they would be retro, so it's sort of like hi-fi retro. And I wanted the music to also have that kind of feel. So a while back, I made 2 EPs that were chiptunes, and I originally made them because I was planning on making video games. I was still new to programming and whatnot, but I was mainly a musician, so I wanted to dip my toe into making video game music. So I made 2 EPs. The first one was in Fami Tracker, as you see here from this video, and the other one was in Reaper. So the first thing I did when making the Pico Pal soundtrack was I took some of these songs and I translated them into a new style that would match the vibe of Pico Pals. But overall, Pico Pals, the soundtrack is like 45 minutes long. I think it's 38 songs. So these 2 EPs weren't enough to like flesh out the whole thing, but it gave me the basis for what would become the soundtrack. And I could work off of these vibes and just figure out the style. So first I want to show you the first song I worked on. It's called Race to the End, and it's the first battle song in the game. So I want to show you the original, and then I'll show you what I did to it to make it fit for Pico Pals. So that's the original, and here's what I did to it to match Pico Pals. So I wanted all the songs to sound similar, or to fit the same cohesive theme, so I decided to use the same few instruments for every song, which is primarily a synthesizer, but because the synthesizer can be edited in all sorts of ways, you can create a unified sound while still having a lot of diversity in the texture of the particular sounds. So the first synth I used for the lead of most of the songs is Massive X, as you see here. So when I use this synth, I'm not going to go into all the details of setting up the synth because that would take forever. If you know synths, you know synths. But then I run it through an EQ, which this is what I would do for a guitar basically. And then I put a little bit of distortion on it to make it a little bit more guitar sounding. A little bit of chorus. There's a lot of chorus in this album, and a little bit of reverb. So because this is trying to simulate the NES, but in a hi-fi way, the soundtrack almost exclusively uses monophonic instruments. Although I occasionally cheat because, you have to be creative and you have to do so many songs, you have to vary it up a bit. But I tried to stick as close as I could to just using one note at a time for each instrument. But then I could layer instruments, not too many because then it wouldn't sound retro, but enough synthesizers to build up chords through monophonic tracks. So this track is doubled with another Massive X. Oh no, actually it's doubled with a Super 8, which is the other synthesizer that I used a lot. And so having two different synthesizers with different sounds is similar to using two different guitars or two different amps to double, even though it doesn't always come across quite as doubled as it would if you're using a real instrument rather than a digital one. But nonetheless, it gets the effect across. So you can see here that the double track comes in and out for emphasis. So this part is just the one, but then when it comes into the chorusy section, they both come in. And then it just sounds bigger. So those two synth tracks, the magenta ones, are basically one instrument, effectively. And then there's a second lead instrument because the NES has two lead tracks, two square wave tracks. So this one is also using a Massive X and another Massive X with different settings, so it sounds different. And you get these little sort of flourishing bits. You can also see there's some panning going on with the automation. And then we have the bass in yellow. I have my Reaper color coding set to Monakai, the coding theme. And the bass, for the bass, I pretty much always use Super 8 with a triangle sound. Pretty much always with a bit of chorus, which is available in the synth. And often, not in this case, but often I use the mix channel with an octave up to give it a little bit more. It also adds to the chorusy kind of sound. So the last element is the drums. And similar to the monophonic synthesizers, I used primarily linear drumming, which means that there's only one drum note at a time. So if you look closely, there's 3 drum tracks, but if you look at them, there's only one hit happening at a time, which is linear. And I experimented with different types of drums, and it was a little hard to figure out what I wanted to do with them. I tried out using more conventional samples and like a bit crushing them to make them sound more retro, but I wasn't really satisfied with that. So what I ended up doing was using Super Audio Cart. So Super Audio Cart is a sample library VST. It plays in the Contact Player, and it has a bunch of instruments from retro consoles. And so I use primarily the SNES and the Genesis sounds, which are still, they're lo-fi, but they're still sample based and they're hi-fi enough to fit the vibe, even though I still think it's not quite perfect, but it does the job. So this is what that sounds like. And there's a bit of phaser. And then also, with every track, I added just a little bit of background noise using this retro color VST. It just add a little bit of the analog sound to it. Again, a retro. So another thing you may have noticed already is that the song is not in common time, or 4/4. That is partially deliberate in the sense that I try to avoid 4/4, but it's also unintentional in that pretty much everything I write is not in 4/4 because 4/4 doesn't feel natural to me, even though it's the commonest time. So in the case of this song, every one of these vertical lines is a time signature shift. And if you look closely, you'll see that it goes from 4/4 to 3/4 to 4/4, then 2 bars of 3/4, then back to 4/4, then 3/4, then 4/4, then some more 3/4. So it's really dynamic, and it's good for a battle song. It's good for like syncopation and rhythm. I just think it makes the song far more interesting. And I think across the entire album, there may only be like 1 or 2 songs that are actually in 4/4 all the way through, and I'm not even sure if any of them are. So here's another song that I translated from my original chiptune EPs, and I want you to pay attention to the drumming, in particular the kick drum. So this song uses linear drumming, however, there is also a triangle kick. So what I mean by that is that the drum tracks are playing the hi-hat and the snare, and they're linear, but there is overlapping drums in the sense that a synth is being used as the kick. So a Super 8, another bass with a triangle, is being used here, so I'll isolate it, and this is what it sounds like. And that is a very, very bassy synth with some like pitch modulation and some LFO or whatever that makes it so that there's some layering to the drum. So with all the drums together, it sounds like this. And I use this technique a few times on the album. And I think it adds a lot of like pulse and drive. And the song altogether with the chorus sounds like this. And also this song is in 15/8 time with occasional mutes for a 2/4. So when I'm making 38 songs, even though they're short songs, it's pretty hard to keep coming up with original ideas that sound catchy and original, to come up with new riffs. So I took inspiration from some of my old music from other sources as well. This is an album I made way back in high school when I was like 18, and this is what a song sounds like that I translated into Pico bows. And the modified version that fits Pico Pals sounds like this. For this song, this main opening riff is in 4/4, and then the chorus section is in 5/4, and then there's an extra 1/4 for a transition, and then there's an interlude section with a solo that's in 4/4. And the interlude section has this like plucky sound like this, that then leads into a solo. This is what the MIDI looks like for the main riff of the song. And you can see here that I'm using, this is 3 instruments, the bass and then the 2 leads. And they're separated into fifths. So the bass and the lead are playing the 1, the root, and then there's a rhythm playing the 5th, which the rhythm ducks out when the main lead does a little flourishy section and then comes back in for the power chords. And so in this way, it's very much a rock song, and a lot of the battle songs are like this, with a lot of fifths and power chords that are in the rock metal kind of style, but still filtered through the synthy NES vibe. So at some point I had to stop using the songs I had already written a long time ago and come up with some new stuff, but I still occasionally took inspiration from other songs. In particular with this song, I was listening to Still Dre, which famously has that plucky, arpeggiated piano sound. I wanted to do something like that, but of course I had to make it more angular and interesting and syncopated. So I took that idea and put it into 9/8 time, and it's very angular and it's kind of off kilter rhythm, and it has a doubling of the bass and the rhythm synths that create a sort of foreboding sound, which fits because the song plays when you're in a cave. So this is what that sounds like. So most of the time, I think producers tend to work off of a keyboard, but I am no pianist by any stretch of the imagination. So usually I start with guitar or bass, even though I do program them in with a keyboard, MIDI keyboard. Usually I write or compose with a guitar or a bass. And in fact, I use the bass more often than not. To start off the song, even though I think most people tend to use chords and stuff to start off a song, which is more of the guitar. But for me, the bass line is really like the backbone, and that's where I start. So here's a song where I started off fiddling with some slap, and it sounds like this. And then when that gets translated into the synthesizers, it sounds like this. So I start with the bass line, and then I sort of just fiddle around in the key or a little bit out of the key sometimes with the leads until I find something that works. So not very much playing the piano, a lot of just fiddling with the notes in the MIDI editor. And this song, is primarily in 4/4, so of course I had to shake it up by adding another section in 5/4, which sounds like this. So here's another song. This is called Tides of Tension, and this is a good example of how I approach rhythm and using the bass primarily as the foundational instrument. So it's in 13/8 time, and so when you're approaching a song that's in a rhythm like this, it's kind of hard to think of like, what am I even gonna do? How do I make it sound natural when it's in that kind of a weird rhythm? So what I do here is have a very repetitive bass, but with an off sync time. So it sounds like this, and it's just playing off of, it's like G, 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 da, 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 that kind of sound. And it's repetitive. So it sets a foundation of like a solid foundation of rhythm that anchors you, even though it's in an odd time. So it sounds like this. And then the rhythm guitar, this part, or the rhythm synth, is doubling the da-da part, but not the duh part, if that makes sense. So together, they add to each other, but they're still not the same. So there's a bit more dynamics to it. So it sounds like this. And that's another technique I use that I learned from doing chiptunes, is that if you want to have a slat bass kind of sound, one of the ways you can do that is to have a triangle synth playing the whole section, and then having a square wave, in this case the rhythm synth, playing just the high notes with a low release. So together it sounds like there's some plucking that adds a little bit of a slat bass kind of sound, a sort of a simulation of slat bass. And then another thing about the rhythm is that the kick drum starts off with four hits, so dun 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 dun, and it sounds like this. And so that four notes makes it seem like it's going to be in common time, but then the actual bar, as it progresses, subverts that expectation by not being in four time and not continuing that dun 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 pattern. And so I think that's a very dynamic and interesting way to go about rhythm, and it makes for a song that is natural, but not common. So the song altogether in the chorus sounds like this, and has a little bit of chords, which is cheating the monophonic thing, but a little bit of that is okay. So I also took inspiration from A Walk on the Wild Side by Lou Reed, which is one of my favorite songs. So I took the bass line and changed it up a bit and added a whole different arrangement. So the original bass line sounds like this. So I changed the key, changed the notes a little bit, and then added a whole different arrangement, and it sounds together like this. Also, this song is in 7/4. Here's another technique I like to use when composing. So this song is in a mix of 4/4 and 6/4. And instead of having the bass be the foundation is the rhythm synth that's in the middle of the pitch spectrum. So the rhythm synth looks like this. So it's hitting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all in the same note, and then 7 more of a different note, and then going back and forth between 2 chords or 2 notes with 7 notes each. And so that's sort of like what the bass would typically be doing, but in this song, the lead and the bass are doubling each other. So if you look at the MIDI, you see that the bass here and the lead look the same, but they're octaves apart. And so what this does is that it makes the bass feel like a lead instrument, and the support is left to the middle range of the pitch spectrum, which is an interesting and unconventional approach. And I really like the way it feels because it puts the bass front and center, and it has a lot of subtle impact. So that together sounds like this. This song also does include some Jingle Bell samples because it plays in the snowy area. There's very little conventional samples on the soundtrack, but there's just a few songs that have a little bit of that. It feels a little bit like cheating, but it's a snowy song, so it just, by convention, you have to have some Jingle Bells. What can you do? Okay, so there's one more song I want to talk about, and this one's called Waning Journey, and it's the overworld theme that plays at the end of the game. So it's supposed to be winding things down. It's a little somber, but it also should be leading you into the final battle. So the song is in 3/4, but it does some interesting things with rhythm. So if we look at this section here, we have the bass and the rhythm, and you can see that the bass is playing two bars. So it's 6 beats, playing A, G, C, and then C an octave higher. But the chords are oscillating between C and G. So each note from the bass is overlapping with 2 different chords in the rhythm. And the chords in the bass don't match up exactly. So it sounds a little bit, off, but intentionally so, to add to the sort of ending of the game feel to it. So it sounds like this. And then you get a little bit more relief when the lead comes in and echoes the rhythm at a higher pitch, which sounds like this. So then it goes back to playing those oscillating CG chords, but the lead comes in playing the same thing it was playing when the 4 chords were playing. So it ends up sounding sort of like 2 different songs are playing at the same time, and it sounds off in a sort of unkiltered way. But after that happens, the rest of the instruments, the bass comes back in and the rhythm switches to the chorus, or the chorus section, and it sounds like relief comes over you as everything becomes one again, and it no longer sounds like 2 songs but 1. So that altogether sounds like this. I think the overall effect is very effective. So that covers everything I want to show you today. I didn't go into every song, of course, because that would take a long time, but I highlighted some things that I thought were interesting and maybe could give you a bit of inspiration for your own music, for your own game. And I want to thank you for watching, and Wishlist the Game on Steam. Thank you very much. This has been Ryan9.